Hi, last timers. This is Hadi again. Today I'm gonna continue reading from the book of Reincarnation and Biology of Dr. Psychiatrist Anne Stevenson. So the previous videos was from unverified birthmarks corresponding to wounds. Same part two, chapter 6. And now I'm gonna go back, jump in to chapter 6, verification of wounds by medical records. And today will be the case of Dellal Beyaz from Turkey. The summary of the case and its investigation. Dellal Beyaz was born in Samandak, Turkey in July 1970. Her parents were Ali Beyaz and his wife Fatma. Ali Beyaz was a cultivator and his wife were Alevis, some sect, Muslim sect in Turkey. And Arabic was their mother tongue. Dellal was the third daughter and seventh child among 8 children that her parents had up to time the case developed. Fatma Beyaz had a dream when she was pregnant with Dellal, but her testimony concerning it varied on 2 different occasions. I shall describe what she said about it later. More significantly, Dellal was found soon after her birth have a prominent birthmark at the back of her head, figure 6-29. Picture right here. Let's see if I can show it here. Right. This figure, there's a remark about it here and underneath the picture. The birthmark at the top of Dellal Beyaz's head as it appeared in September 1975 when she was 5 years old. The birthmark was approximately around hairless area somewhat resembling the scar of a wound. It was a little less than 1 centimeter in diameter. Dellal began to speak clearly when she was between the ages of 1 and 2. As soon as she could speak, she began referring to a previous life, and during the next year, she made a number of statements about it. She said that she was from Kavasli. She stated the name of the person whose life she was recalling and the names of her husband and several of her children. She described how she had been on a roof hanging a wash jacket to dry when she fell and landed on her head on a concrete floor. When Dellal was between 2 and 3 years old, she was demanding to be taken to Kavasli. Dellal's parents had no connection with Kavasli, and her mother later told me that at the time Dellal was asking to be taken there, she had no idea where it was. She added that she herself had never even been into Antakya, the large city of which Kavasli is a suburb. Accordingly, Fatma and Ali Beyaz did nothing to verify Dellal's statements. It happened, however, that one day a man, Ali Mehmet Kos, spelled like Kose, who lived in near Kavasli, came over to Samandak to visit a friend who was a neighbor of the Beyaz family. From this friend, Ali Mehmet Kos learned what Dellal was saying about how she had died in a previous life. and he also heard about her birthmark. It occurred to him that Dallas might be remembering the life of his aunt, Zahid Calls. Zahid Calls. That's her name in past life. Who had fallen through a hole in a roof, landed on her head, and died of the injuries she received. Zahid had lived at Kavasli, so what Dellal was saying seemed to match her life closely. Ali Mehmed Kos told his uncle, Ali Hassan Kos, and Ali Hassan's Zahid's oldest daughter, Sabiha, about Dellal. This stimulated Sabiha and her husband, Hassan Mehmed Kos, to go to Samandak and visit Dellal. Dellal recognized Sabiha and answered correctly numerous questions about the life of Zahid that Sabiha put to her. After this initial meeting between the two families, further visits were exchanged between them. Dellal was taken to Kavasli and made further recognitions there, and members of Zahid's family came to visit her at Samandak. Up to April 1975, Dellal had been 3 times to Kavasli, and members of Zahid's closest family had visited her 3 times in Samandak. Risat Bayer, this guy was working with the doctor, first learned of this case from an informant in Samandak when he was there investigating other cases in April 1975. At that time, he had a brief interview with Fatma Beyaz, Dellal's mother, in September 1975. He had a brief interview, pardon me. He and I continued to the investigation of the case. We had further interview with Dellal's mother, at which Dellal's paternal grandmother was also present. We then interviewed 3 informants from Zahid's closest family. We also, at this time, obtained a copy of the extremely brief medical records of the admission of Zahid's cause to the government hospital at Antakya, and a somewhat longer medical report from the inquest into Zahid's death. Risat Bayer and I did not meet Dellal or other informants for this case after 1975. However, in 1983, Dr. Ken Polat, at my request, had follow-up interview with Dellal and also clarified some puzzling details. In 1991, an informant directed Dr. Jürgen Kehl to this case, and he began a fresh investigation of it. He met and interviewed Dellas and her mother at considerable length before Dellal's brother, who was also present during Dr. Kehl's interview, told him that I had investigated the case many years earlier. Dr. Kehl did not meet any member of Zahid's family. These are the persons interviewed during the investigation. In Samandak, we interviewed Dellal Beyaz, Fatma Beyaz, Dellal's mother, Elif Beyaz, Dellal's paternal grandmother. In Kavasli, Udabasi, Antakya, we interviewed Ali Hassan Kos, Zahid's closest husband, Sabiha Kos, Zahid and Ali Hassan Kos's oldest daughter, Hassan Mehmed Kos, Sabiha Kos's husband, and Ali Mehmed Kos, Ali Hassan Kos's nephew. Dellal's father, Ali Beyaz, was away from home at the time of investigation of this case, and I did not interview him. The informants for this case spoke Turkish imperfectly, and Risat Bayer had to obtain help at the time from Arabic-speaking persons who were also competent in Turkish. I believe that some of the discrepancies in the testimony which I shall mention later, arose from difficulty the impairment and interpreters had in finding a correct word in Turkish for what they wished to describe. A relevant fact of geography and possibilities for normal means of communication between the two families. Samandak is a large town nearly at the southern border of the Turkish province of Hatay or Hatay. It is approximately 30 kilometers south of Antakya, which is the capital and the second largest city in Hatay. Almost adjoining Antakya on its northern side is the largest village of Udabasi and Kavasli. Is name given to the part of the Udabasi that lies on the eastern side of the Antakya Iskenderun highway. Fatma Beyaz said that the two families concerned in this case had no knowledge of each other's existence before they met in connection with the case. I found quite credible her denial that she did not know where Kavasli was and had never even visited Antakya before the case developed. The women of the Arabic-speaking Alevis in that part of Turkey, although not completely housebound, do not often travel away from communities where they live, unless sometimes to work elsewhere in picking cotton or other harvesting. Although I did not interview Fatma's husband, Dellal's father, it is probable that he would have gone into Antakya from time to time for major shopping, since it is a much larger city than Samandak. Zahid's husband, Ali Hassan Kols, was a small shopkeeper. He said that he had no customers or relations in Samandak and had never visited it before the case developed. His son-in-law Hassan Mehmet Kols and his nephew Ali Mehmet Kols similarly said that they had no relatives in Samandak. As we have seen, Ali Mehmet did not have a friend in Samandak who lived near the Beyaz family. But dellal was already talking about the previous life at the time he went to visit this friend. He did not even meet dellal until the time of her second visit to Kavasli. Although I inquired about knowledge of dellal's family on the part of Ali Hassan Kols and his son and nephew, I failed to ask them whether Zahid had any relatives in Samandak. In 1991, Dr. Kale learned from Fatma Beyaz that Zahid had some relatives in Samandak, and Fatma had known them but had never met Zahid. Zahid might be pronounced as he had. Okay, depends how you pronounce it. So, the two families concerned in this case lived approximately equal social and economic conditions. Judging by their houses, I should think the Coles family was somewhat more prosperous than the Beyaz family. The physical distance between their communities, given the means of the transportation in that part of the Turkey, more than other factors, makes it unlikely that they had ever known each other before the case developed. The life and death of Zahid Coles. I learned almost nothing about Zahid's life before the fatal accident that ended it. She was born in 1914, the daughter of a man called Suleiman. When she grew up, she married Ali Hassan Kols and 11 children, and had 11 children, of whom 9 survived in 1975. She She and her husband started married life in a village, but they later moved to the center of Antakya and then to Kavasli. They had been in newly built house at Kavasli for only 10 days when the heat fell through a hole in the roof. When I was in Kavasli, Ali Hassan Coles showed me that the place where the accident had occurred. The house had not been completely finished at the time he and his wife moved into it. An outside stairway gave access to the roof, which was a suitable place for hanging out laundry to dry. A rather large hole and being left in the roof, and it was intended to build an interior staircase from the floor below to the roof, which would be reached through this open hole. By the time of my visit, the hole had been closed up, but I could see where it had been, and I estimated its dimensions as having been about 3/4 of a meter wide and rather more than a meter long. It was certainly large enough for a person to fall through. At the time of Zahid's accident, the hole had been covered with a thin sheet of iron. This could have kept the rain from falling on the floor below, but it could have borne no weight and might actually have made it difficult to remember that it covered a large hole. But that as it may, on June 6, 1970, Zahid was on the roof hanging out jacket she had washed when she fell through the hole in the roof. Probably she forgot that the hole was behind her and stepped back in the iron sheet, which yielded under her weight and let her fall through. Just how her body pitches as it fell down in a matter of conjecture. As she developed a large bruise above her right eye, that part of the head may have struck the edge of the opening in the concrete as she fell through the hole. I estimated the distance between the roof on which Zahid had been standing on the floor of concrete to which she fell below as between 3.5 and 4 meters. The doctor who examined her body later found a bruise on one loin, and this part of the body may have touched the concrete first, followed almost immediately by the collision of her head with the floor. Zahid's husband was not at home when the accident occurred, but a boy saw it and quickly ran to fetch Zahid's daughter Sabiha. She came quickly and found her mother unconscious and groaning. She noted a wound above her right eye and another at the top of her head. Shortly thereafter, Zahid's husband came to the scene of the accident and transported his wife to the government hospital in Antakya. He later disqualified himself as a first-hand witness of the injuries on his wife's body. For this, we can turn next to the records of the hospital of the inquest into the accident. The records of Zahid's hospital admission. The hospital records were sketchy, but they included the following statement, which I have slightly rearranged to make them more coherent. They were dictated by a doctor the day after Zahid's death. The patient fell from a balcony. This is a statement of the doctor. The patient fell from a balcony. She could not speak. She was vomiting. The eyes were swollen, and there was there was an ecchymosis over the right eyebrow. Cause of death. That's the cause of death. Cerebral hemorrhage or head injury. The report did not mention a wound at the top or back of the head. The medical report filed with the inquest conducted by the procurator's office contained the same information and little more. It mentioned about five of them. The first one, a large hematoma of the right eye. Second, a skin deep wound of the left eyebrow, sewn with one suture, an ecchymotic area about the size of a fist in the right loin, abrasion of the skin of the right wrist, cause of death, cerebral hemorrhage, subsequent to injuries and on the head. Okay. The case of the death being so obvious, the pathologist saw no need to perform a detailed autopsy. According to the hospital records, Zahid Kos died on June 7, 1970, the day after the accident and her admission to the hospital. She was about 56 years old. An announcing dream. In April 1975, Fatma Beyaz told Reset Bayer during his first preliminary interview with her that before dellal was born, she had dreamed that her baby had come from the village of Kabasli. However, when she reviewed this dream a few months later with Reset Bayer and me on September 28, 1975, she denied that the person appearing in the dream had said that she was from Kabasli. After the withdrawing of this detail, nothing relevant to the case remained of the dream. Fatma Beyaz showed a strange reluctance to talk about the dream, almost as if she were ashamed of having had it. I thought that her husband might have clarified this matter, but he was not available. If something happened about the information she had about the dream, there's some kind of energy or entity who can that they want to deviate the true information. Same thing happened in the hospital. So her family, her husband, and everybody, they remember the scene of her death, and the hospital says something else. Anyway, statements and recognitions made by the lab. In table 6.9, here on the page, next page, I have listed first the statement items from 1-13 that Fatma Beyaz said dellal made before the two families met. For several of these, I have listed Sabiha Kos as a corroborator because she said that dellal repeated them to her when the first went to Samandag to meet her again. Fatma Beyaz's mother-in-law, Alif Beyaz, was present throughout our long interview with Fatma on September 28, 1975. She did not intervene during the interview, but when it was over, I asked her whether, having listened to everything that Fatma had said, she wished to add or subtract anything. She said that she wished to do neither. And I took this mean that she agreed with what Fatma had said. I have not, however, listed her in the table as an additional informant because I do not know how well informed she was. On item 14, dellal's recognition of Sabiha Kos occurred when Sabiha first visited dellal at Samandak. Item 15 occurred at the time of dellal's first visit to Cavasli. Because it was introduced by a Queuing question, I regard it as almost worthless, although dellal's shyness on seeing Zahid's husband was certainly an inappropriate response towards someone whom she regarded as her husband. Item 16 also occurred at the time of dellal's first visit to Cavasli. I was told of other recognitions that dellal had made in Cavasli. As reported by Ali Hassan Coase, some of these were stimulated by questions that gave cues, like the one that invited dellal to recognize him as Suleiman, for example, who is Mediha. About other recognitions, such as a person in photographs whom dellal was said to have recognized, I learned insufficient details. I therefore have not included any other recognitions in the table. I learned of one person dellal did not recognize. This was Ali Mehmet Coase, the man of Zahid's family who had first learned about dellal's claims to be Zahid reborn. He had met dellal at the time of her second visit to Cavasli and said that she had not recognized him. Dellal employed pertinent expressions in recognizing Ali Hassan's cause when he came to Samandak to see her. She had already met him once in Cavasli. It shows in the item 15, table 6-9. So the fact of recognizing him in Samandak was not remarkable, but her manner of doing so perhaps was. When he went to see her, he brought her a dress and some jewelry. After giving her this gift, he asked her who had brought them to her. She replied, Abu Sulaiman. The Arabic word for Abu means father of Sulaiman. And when attached to the name of the man's oldest son, it commonly becomes the name by which the man becomes known after the birth of this son. Zahid and Ali Hassan Coase's oldest son was Sulaiman, and thus her use of expression was correct, even though not specific, given her conviction that she was Zahid's Coase, Ali Hassan's Coase's wife, and Sulaiman's mother. Some confusion occurred in statements about the place from which Zahid had fallen. Fatma Beyaz used the Turkish word balkoni, in telling Risat Beyer in April 1975 what dellal had said about the way she had died in the previous life. Ali Hassan's Coase said that dellal had said that she had fallen from a roof of the house at Cavasli when she showed fear upon being taken there at the age of about 2 years. I described her reaction at that time later. In September 1975, dellal herself used the word roof in going over detail which Risat Beyer and me, but by then she had visited the house at Cavasli and could have learned normally that Zahid had fallen from a roof. The word balcony also got into notes made by the doctor who examined Zahid at the government hospital in Antakya. It is possible, although I have not confirmed this, that the Arabic-speaking informants of the case were unable to distinguish verbally an open roof and a balcony. In September 1975, Risat Beyer engaged dellal in a short conversation about her memories of the previous life. She repeated some of the essential details of how Zahid had died and gave several names of members of Zahid's family. This review showed that at least some of her memories were persisting up to her age at that time, about 5 years old. Dellal's behavior related to the previous life. Circumstances and manner of detail speaking about the previous life. According to Fatma Bayer, Dellal began to refer to the previous life as soon as she could speak. She said the name Nahla and seemed to be addressing someone with that name. She talked to herself and was heard to say, Nahla, go and tell Sabiha that her mother has died. Quote, end quote. As she said this, she tried to scoop a hole in the earth. When Fatma Beyaz heard Dellal speaking in this way, she asked her how she had died in the presumed previous life, and Dellal told her how she had fallen down while hanging up a jacket to be dried. I did not learn of later circumstances associated with Dellal speaking about the previous life. Between the age of 2 and 3, she was asking to be taken to Kabasli, where she wanted to see her daughter. Dellal's expression of emotion on meeting members of Zahid's family. When Dellal met members of Zahid's family, she showed strong emotions. When Sabiha Kos first came over to Samandag to meet Dellal, Dellal, cried so much that she could not eat some cake that Sabiha had brought her. Sabiha also cried at this at this first meeting. When Dellal met Zahid's children at Kavasli, she hugged them. Dellal's fears. When I asked Fatma Beyaz whether Dellal had any unusual fears, she at first replied in the negative. In response, then to leading questions about fear of heights. She said that Dellal did not show fear when she went up on a roof. The roofs of many houses in that part of Turkey are flat and have no guard rail at their edges. When Dellal was first taken to Kabasli, she had told her parents that she wished to go to the house of Zahid's daughter Sabiha, and she went there first. Afterward, she was brought to Zahid's house where Ali Hassan Kos was still living. Here she was reluctant to go into the house and cried. She said that she had fallen from its roof and died. The attitude of the adults concerned toward Dellal's memories. The adults of both families seems to have encouraged Dellal to speak about the previous life when she wished to do so. However, her family made no effort to verify her statements about a previous life, and they only learned of their accuracy. Through the chance visit of a member of the Kosi family of Kabasli to their neighbors, later the case received no publicity, and Recep Bayer would never have heard about it if he had not been in Samandak for the investigation of the other cases. Dellal's birthmark in the figure 629, one I showed you guys earlier, shows Dellal's birthmarks in September 1975 when she was a little over 5 years old. The birthmark was around hairless area, almost in the center of the top of her head. It was a little less than 1 centimeter in diameter. In appearance, it resembled the scar of a healed wound. It was red when Beyaz was born, but was not bleeding or oozing. No one else in the family had a similar birthmark. In infancy and early childhood, Beyaz sometimes acted as if she felt if she felt discomfort or pain at the sight of the birthmark. Her mother noted that when she was placed on her back so that the birthmark would be against the bed, she turned herself on her side. She would sometimes complain of pain in her head and in her throat. At the time of our interview, September 1975, when dellal was asked how she had died, she pointed towards her throat. This may, however, have been a poorly aimed indication of her head. Her general health was then good. Comments. Comments. Although Sabiha Kos said that she had not noticed a wound on the top of her mother's head, the medical record that I examined did not mention a wound there. It seems almost certain that the doctor examining the injuries that he would have looked at the head with a view to learning how she had become unconscious. Both medical reports attributed her death to head injuries. However, the injury to the brain was the important lesion from the perspective of the doctors, and they might have felt no need to record an abrasion on the scalp. Comments on the evidence of paranormal processes in the case. None of the persons concerned in this case seems to have had any reason either to suppress it or to exaggerate it. It involved murder or scandal, and there were no gulfs of wealth or castle of the kind that sometimes separate the concerned families in the cases of India. I have seldom investigated a case less complicated than this one with regard to possible motives for distorting the testimony in it. The uneducated villagers of South Central Turkey have notoriously unreliable memories for dates. Still, there is no reason to think that Della's mother would have been more than a month off in her statement that Della was born in July 1970. We can be certain from the medical record that Zahid died on June 7, 1970. This means that Della was born within a few weeks, perhaps even within a few days of Zahid's death. If we decide that reincarnation is the best interpretation of the case, we should have to suppose that the injury of Zahid's head somehow affected Della's fetal body not long before her birth. A short interval between the previous personality's death and the subject's birth has occurred in other cases, of which I give a list in the table 14-2. Della's later development. In May 1983, Dr. Polat met Della in Samandak for a show-up interview with her. She was then almost 13 years old. She had completed primary school and was staying at home unemployed. Della said that her memories of the previous life had not faded. However, she had not spoken about them spontaneously for many years. Since the age of 3, she thought she sometimes spoke about the previous life when she met members of Zahid's closest family, or when other persons asked her a question about it. She still remembered in particular the pain in Zahid's throat when she fell from the roof. Dellal said that she no longer had the fears she had felt and shown when younger. She continued to exchange visits with the Coast family there rather than she initiated such a visit, but she apparently welcomed them as much as they. A visit between the families had occurred 4 months before Dr. Pollard's interview. Although in most cases visits between the two families concerned attenuates and usually cease after a few years. This did not happen in Dellal's case. Dr. Kell learned in 1991 that Dellal, who was born 20 years old, who was then 20 years old, was still visiting Zahid's family about twice a year. Early in 1991, Dellal had attended the wedding of Zahid's daughters, Samir. Samir, the daughter. At this time, Dellal was calling herself Zahid, but Dr. Kell did not learn when she had begun to do this. No informant had told me that Deleuze had asked to be called Zahid when she was a young child. Comments. The encouragement of the Deleuze expression of her memories by both families concerned and the continuing visit between them had probably tended to keep Deleuze's memories fresh. However, it is also possible that she had lost the original imaged memories of the previous life. Excuse me. Or some of them and replaced this with the memories both of what others had said she had early said and of normally acquired information. It is exceeding difficult to distinguish the different sources of a parent's memories in a child of Deleuze's age. At the time Dr. Pollard met her Stevenson 1974. And here's finished the case of Deleuze. I will go later another day for another case. I'm not gonna read all the book. I just gonna choose a few cases. It's a long book. Thank you for whoever listening now. And I'm gonna do translation Arabic later today. Thank you for listening and have a good one. Bye bye.